Hi, this is the first update on the start of my bridge idea. Now, I've bought this basic bridge, as you can see, and I'm not going to be able to do the bridge full justice, but I want to get something close enough that I can use on my table wall. This is the length of my table. So that's pretty much all I've got to work with, and my storage is normally in that cabinet there, or the boxes underneath the table. Now obviously this is going to end up being quite a big piece, so I've got to think how I'm actually going to do this, whether I can make it so I can part build it and then take it apart when it's not in use. Obviously the main board itself, what I'm looking at is this, I don't know the name of the material, but it's sign writing board. It's a plastic, it's carvable. I actually got these offcuts free from a local sign writer. He gave me quite a few bits and I use a lot of it for basing. It's easy to carve, it's fairly lightweight, but nevertheless it's going to be bulky, as you can see. So I've got to think really about how I can actually make it firm enough to take it apart and put it together, because obviously the bridge itself, I've not actually glued it together here, it's just dry fit, so it could fall over at any point. And obviously its main strength comes from the slots in the board provided that's part of the bridge. Now what I've got to look at is putting the bridge together and seeing whether it'll be strong enough to stand as it is, and then put into this when I'm using it. The other issue is obviously, given the length of the table as I've shown you, I'm going to have a fairly steep slope coming down to road level, which again I need to think about. I can't make it much shorter because, as you can see, I'm going to have to take a bit of liberty as regards how close the buildings were. So it's going to have to be about there. And then of course the other thing that you've got to bear in mind, I don't know whether I can do it with one hand, is that the main part of the bridge has got to be up to about that level. Obviously it's got to kind of stand up fairly high so that the level of the buildings the top floor of the building is looking down over the bridge. So possibly about that height, which means I'm going to have some blue foam stanchions to actually support the bridge, and probably a fair few more than the bridge actually has, purely because, as you can see, just holding this board, you can see it's starting to droop down in different places. So it's going to need some support, and because in reality, in the real bridge, I would say that the building is set way away from the bridge, and it's still part of the ongoing slope through the town. But in my case, I'm going to have to bring that quite a bit closer and have it at least there, which is quite close, obviously. But other than that, I just wouldn't get it on my table. So there are going to have to be compromises, and there's no doubt about that. But as long as it's playable, I mean, I can suspend that part of my imagination and get it to feel right. At the end of the day, it's mainly for me to play on, so. But I want it to look the part, even if it's not completely historically accurate. The other thing that I wanted to do is, obviously this basic bridge, as you can see, is just the road itself and that's it. And I really do want the walkways. So if I do use this material, and I'm thinking I will, because I think if I use MDF, it's just going to warp anyway. I know this bows, but it still keeps its integrity. What I want is the walkway either side, just to, you know, give it a bit more of a nod towards the real bridge. And what I was thinking is, with this being fairly firm stuff, I can drill holes at various points to mount some uprights, and then put a rail on that, and perhaps bring it just as far as here, and then curve it down. I don't think that there's. I think if I make it much shorter, it's just not going to look the part, which is a shame because storage is a real issue for me. But I think just to make it look the part, I think I've got to go with this. And luckily, I've got another length. You can see it leaning against my cabinet there, that I'll be able to use to make separate downward slopes at either end. But as I say, it will have to be fairly steep, which probably won't look, you know, it won't look great. But it's a compromise I'm going to have to make to fit it on my table. If I'd got a permanent layout, it'd be totally different, because obviously I'd build it with that in mind and build the bridge as a centre part of it. But unfortunately, I ain't in that position. I haven't got the spare room, so it's got to be collapsible and it's got to be playable on this table. So they're my constraints, and I just thought I'd bring you on board for that, just to show you the way I'm thinking and, you know, some of the issues that I'm going to face with it. And I'll bring you back when I've moved on a bit and decided which way to go. So what I've done is I've actually positioned the bridge in place and traced around it, and then traced the actual slots that need cutting. And what I'm hoping to do now is to use a Stanley knife to cut those out, and then I can at least just test the uprights in it and see how they'd stand without being glued in place. Right, I'll bring you back in a minute. So that's cut the slots out. I had to tinker with it a bit just to make them wide enough, but I was trying to make sure that I didn't overdo it, because if I am going to be able to take this apart and put it back together, I really need that to be fairly firm. So I'll just try and put them in the slots now. Hopefully they'll be right, because I've tested them a few times as I cut it. There, that one was in. Sorry about this, it's a bit awkward when you're doing it one-handed. So that's that one in. That's that one in. Yeah. So there we have it. So they're in place. And obviously, you know, when I've put the rest of the bridge together and glued it, that should be firm enough then to be just lifted out and put in when I need it. And then the board could be stored separately. So that's the first stage. What I'm going to be looking at now is putting some holes in the outer edges for the rails. But obviously, again, I've got to bear in mind how close I'm going to have this building, because, as I say, to make it viable on my table, I think the house is going to have to be, you know, very close to the bridge, you know, something like that, but then obviously up in the air. But I think that's the price I can pay, really, for having it so I can play on my own dining table. So what I'll do now is I'm going to have a look at the rail system, because I've got to think about I know I'm going to drill the holes to actually put the uprights in, but I've got to think about what I'm actually going to use, what material. I need something fairly that's going to be robust, because it's obviously going to have to stand in storage somewhere. Yeah, I'll have a ponder about that one, and I'll bring you back when I've moved on to the next stage. So while I ponder what I'm doing with the rails, what I'm going to start by doing is sticking the two pieces of the bridge together and clamp that so it dries, and then obviously build it up to see how firm it is when it's just standing still. Right, I'll bring you back when I've got them clamped. So what I've done now is I've glued the two pieces of each side together, and I'm going to leave that clamped for a while. And when that's done, I'll come back and put the joining stanchions in, and then just see how firm that stands. Right. So what I've been doing is I looked at some old photos, and I noticed the paths either side were basically paved stones. So I basically freehand drew some of it and then linked it up with a ruler. And initially I was pressing on really hard with a pen. 2 biros later I realised that was probably going to be quite long-winded. So what I decided to do then was switch to this, and that really did dig in a lot better. That said, it's it's not a job for someone with arthritis. I'll tell you what, I can barely pick a pen up right now, but hey ho, it'll be worth it. The only thing that I probably, in retrospect, I might have done differently, and I'm going to find out how painful that might be, is the green that you see is what the is what they keep on one surface where they're going to print the sign, you know, to make sure it's absolutely clean. Now, obviously, I'll just see if I can piggle a bit of it to show you it coming up. There we go. Obviously, that keeps it clean for them to print on. Now, in retrospect, I might have been better off doing these paving stones after I took this off, because as you can see now, where I've dug into it, a lot of the individual bits are going to stick. So obviously I'm going to then have to sit and piggle them all out. Mind you, it's not as bad as I thought. I thought a lot more would come out, but yeah, but that's the impression it leaves. And obviously I've drawn a few cracks on in places as well. It doesn't look much at the moment, but what I'll be doing when I get to that stage is I'll be painting it black and then dry brushing it up to make it look more like paving. But yeah, it took some time for me to do that, but it'll be worth it, I'm sure. Okay then, I'll leave it there for now, and I'll bring you back shortly. I've had a complete rethink on this bit, because I want to make sure that I can take it apart completely. I want to be able to store it, basically. So what I've done, as you can see, is I've actually cut the board up now into sections. And basically I've cut 2 new sections as well, which are going to be the steep slopes coming back down from the bridge, which I've still got to score up with the pathway. But what I've also done is cut these stanchions out of the blue foam, because that'll keep it light, and obviously it'll allow me to just build it up and take it down in an instant. I was overthinking it before. I was trying to make it semi-permanent, but I think, you know, storage wise that's going to be a problem for me. So basically, if I can do this one-handed, I'll show you what I'm thinking. So put them move it back slightly. So that will sit on there like that. Obviously I'm going to do some kind of brick pattern on these and then paint them up. And then what I've also done is cut two with a slight slope in them. So that one, sorry about the wobbly camera. And this is it. Obviously I'm going to cut that to match. Just sit that down. And then so there, that's how I'm going to have it. And that way I can just take it up, pack it away into a box, no problem. No storage problems or anything. And then if you, I'll just take this that you see me, that will sit in there like that in the centre of the bridge, and obviously the rest of it on the other side. So what I'm going to be looking at now is putting some kind of railings along the edge here, and the same on the other side. I was thinking, like I say, something more permanent, but to be honest, I really don't think that's gonna. It's the quickest way to set it up when you want to play the game. So, and it gets around all of my problems with storage. So it sits well with the building. So the second floor and the top floor are looking down on the bridge. As I say, I've had to, you know, as I said earlier, the scale of the bridge is too big for this table, so I've had to considerably shorten that to make it, you know, viable for me to be able to play it. So that's just one of the small compromises I'm prepared to make, because obviously in reality the bridge stretches further into the city and at the same height, but I'm afraid I can't find a dining table that long, so this is going to be my compromise, and in my mind's eye when I'm playing it'll be fine. So right, well, I'm going to carry on. I'm going to look through now and see whether there's anything that I can utilise fence wise, and then I'll bring you back. Now, I've carved the paving stones into the other two extra pieces, and what I'm doing now is just using an old stone to put lots of bumps and marks into the road surface, you know, because I don't want it to look too pristine, because I don't know about you, but I've never seen a road that looks pristine. So I'm just rolling it about basically, and then banging it here and there just to give it a rougher surface. I don't know whether you can pick any of that out. I'll try and get the right angle for it. And I'm going to do that to all of these other pieces. Make it so they've all got that wear on them. Because then what I can do is I can get these primed in their black colour to start with, and then build it up from there. So what I've done with these stanchions is I've just crudely carved out a brick pattern going, you know, right around the blocks. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to use some probably Mod Podge and brown to give this a base coat. And then after that I'll be dry brushing it back up towards a more of a light beige colour for these stanchions. And in the meanwhile I'll be spraying the actual road pieces with some black primer just to get them started too. So I'll get that done and then I'll bring you back again. So I've spray painted these with some black primer now, both sides. And I'm in the process of mixing up some Mod Podge, and then I've got this paint that I've added to it, and then I'm going to add some sand as well to give it a bit of a texture, and then I shall be painting that on the stanchions. So I'll do that and then I'll bring you back and show you the next stage. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking each individual road piece and I'm doing like a fairly heavy overbrush on the pavements now. I'll make that more subtle in time, but I just wanted to bring it up to a totally different colour to the rest of the road. The stanchions I'm still going to give another coat before lightening them up. And the bridge itself, I've now sprayed that. I think it's like a silver grey, and then the top lift off piece. So at the moment I'll be working on these roads and getting them all to the same state, and then I'm going to actually do a bit more weathering on the roads in the middle of it itself. And then, as I say, I've got to give this a slight coat more on the stanchions, but then obviously really bring them up to more like a sandstone colour. Right, I'll bring you back when I've moved on a little bit. So I've made the stanchions a proper beige colour now. The bridge is drying nicely. I've got the roads pretty much where I need them at the moment. Just need to work on the pathways a bit more. So I've got some fine 5mm square mesh, and what I'm going to go for is 3 of the 5mm squares, and then I've cut out a piece, so I'm just leaving uprights at different lengths. And what I'm going to use, using this little drill, is I'm going to drill a little hole into the actual edge of the bridge and drop them down into the holes and then seal it with super glue, and that will work as my handrails for the walkways at the side of the bridge. But first of all I've got to drill these little holes in, so I'll do that and then I'll bring you back. Right, so I've drilled the pilot holes and dropped these at regular intervals down into the foam board, and then sealed it with a bit of super glue. It's still fairly flexible, but I need it to be something like this. I would have normally I'd have gone for something like matchsticks, but on the basis that this is going to come in and out of storage boxes all the time, I needed something that was going to be just a little bit more robust and stand up to the knocks. And at the same time, it does quite a decent job of looking like an handrail and making the railings for the actual walkway. And then obviously at a distance, when they're on, it'll look even more effective. And there's plenty of room in here for soldiers to walk and stand, so there's no problems there. So all I've got to do is just take my time and do one for each side, for each piece, and just cut it basically to the same pattern, and then drill into this board and push it down, and that'll seal it. Right, so I'll get the next one cut now, and I'll bring you back when this is complete and show you how it should look for one of the finished pieces. Right, so I've put the second fence up in on the bridge part now. So as you can see, I'll bring it a bit closer. It's a bit of a compromise, but as I say, it will give it a little bit more strength when it comes to storing it, because you know, you can imagine even being careful, putting it in and out of boxes over and over again. The matchstick, one breaks and you're back to the beginning, you got to put it all back in. I'm not saying that this wire won't pop out on occasions, but it wouldn't be such a big issue to put it back together because it's all one piece. So with that one done, I'll start the next straight now. Right, I'll bring you back in a second. So this has got it all together now. As you can see, I've had to sacrifice a bit of realism, just really to make it playable on my table. And as I say, with the storage, the fact that it's got to go in and out of storage, I can't really go for the delicate type of fittings I would have liked, because, you know, sure as eggs are eggs, you'd end up breaking it more often than playing it. But I think, you know, it does a reasonable job of representing the bridge. And, you know, there's options. I could put the bridge at the other end and bring both straights up here, and that way, you know, change the way I play on it. But at least I've got the options with having all these pieces. And the houses, as you can see, although they're closer, they are looking down over the bridge. So, you know, it makes for a workable game. And as I said right from the outset, really, you know, it's a budget bridge, and it's just trying to be something just a bit more than it is. So what I'm thinking next is possibly whether to build some blue foam steps going up to the fence here, and then like cut a gateway through the fence. But again, have them as separate pieces that can just be put on and taken away. So that's another element that I'm thinking of having. And then possibly another element is to just do some detailing around where these bars meet to make it look like it's got nuts and bolts on it, just to give it a little bit more definition. Another element that I probably do need to think about is having a bunker on the bridge, which really I probably want about here. But again, it's making it fit, because obviously, realistically, you're going to be wanting to put like an MMG on possibly a 2-inch disc, which is not going to fit on that narrow path. But realistically, I couldn't really go for making the path any wider, because again, it hits the storage problems. But what I can do is, obviously, if I do go up with the steps coming up to the bridge, that's an element that would give me a bit more space to put the bunker. So, and I think basically that's going to be something that I'll look at in part 2 of the bridge build, because I think at this point we'll leave it where it is, and I'll come back to you in part 2 of the bridge build and have a look at what I'm going to be doing about the steps coming up to the road. Hope you've found some of this interesting. I'm sure there's lots of other ways that it could be done, but as I say, just got to make it playable. Well, thanks for joining me anyway, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.